Welcome to Voices Between Worlds, the podcast where literature, culture, and lived experience meet on the page and in the ear. Today, we're diving into a fascinating conversation with Kofi Awoonor, a distinguished Ghanaian writer and poet whose work has left a remarkable mark on African literature. Awoonor's journey as an artist is intricately linked to his experiences living in America during the early 1970s, a time that influenced not only his art but also his identity. Let's unravel these layers together.
Kofi Awoonor spent just over 3 years in the United States when this interview took place. He candidly shares that America had not yet heavily impacted his work. He was still in the process of settling in. However, he believed that his American experience would inevitably weave its way into his writing. For Awoonor, America wasn't merely a location, it became a totality of experiences, especially shaped by his identity as a Black individual in both Ghana and the U.S.
What's fascinating is how Awoonor refuses to compartmentalize these experiences into distinct categories. Instead, he views human experience as a tapestry woven from threads of joy, sorrow, and struggle, rejecting the simplistic division between African and American. He explains that when he eventually writes fully about America, it will not be a fragmented portrayal, but a holistic landscape. This approach challenges our perception of identity and highlights the complex nature of human experiences across cultures.
Indeed, he expands on who he envisions as his audience. Awoonor does not limit his readers to a narrow demographic defined by race or nationality. Instead, he seeks to connect with sensitive and aware readers who appreciate literature in any context. He hopes the same audiences that engage with major American novelists are equally open to the voices of African writers and vice versa. But he acknowledges the potential for some readers to find elements of his work esoteric.
Like famed writers such as T.S. Eliot or James Joyce, Awoonor agrees that pouring one's whole self and cultural richness into writing can make it challenging for the casual reader. However, he does not see this difficulty as exclusion. Rather, it's an invitation for readers to engage actively with the text, meeting it halfway, so to speak. This emphasizes the collaborative nature of reading and writing, requiring effort from both sides.
Language is central to Awoonor's craft. He writes in both Iwe, which is a language spoken in Ghana, and English. One of his long poems, I Heard a Bird Cry, was first composed in Iwe before he translated it into English. Interestingly, this is a common practice in his work. He often begins his poems in Iwe, deeply rooted in the rhythms and laments of his home traditions, before allowing them to bloom in English.
When he translates his own poems, Awoonor highlights that this process isn't a mere word-for-word change. It's about shifting through different cultural atmospheres. He positions himself as a bridge between the two languages, noting that imagery and feelings can change shape in the translation process. Words and phrases rooted in Iwe songs and rituals might expand or mutate when expressed in English, depending on his desired effect. This illustrates the dynamic nature of language and the art of translation.
Moreover, Awoonor insists that he does not domesticate Iwe traditions for Western audiences. He purposefully avoids translating certain customs into simple English equivalents, believing that would dilute their sacred essence. Instead, he allows these elements to stand authentically, trusting that, as a whole, his work will illuminate their meanings over time. This approach exhibits his deep respect for oral traditions, seeing himself as an articulator of these stories rather than their owner.
By weaving Iwe traditions into modern poetry, Awoonor believes their deeper complexity emerges. This is not just beneficial for African audiences who recognize these traditions, but also for global readers willing to listen attentively and respectfully. It's a call for all of us to approach literature with openness, seeking to understand the nuances rather than oversimplifying diverse cultural expressions.
As we delve deeper, Awoonor reflects on his own creative growth across three distinct phases. The first phase focuses on the technical structures of Iwe songs, dirges, laments, and repetition, imparting a stark, almost naive quality to his early poems. He emphasizes how even while writing in English, the skeletal framework of these poems is directly derived from Iwe ceremonial forms.
In the second phase, conflict emerges prominently in his work. This tension exists between the Iwe tradition and European poetic norms. Awoonor consciously juxtaposes English lines with echoes of EU lyrics or integrates influences from poets like T.S. Eliot, Gerard Manley Hopkins, and W.B. Yeats. This deliberate blend creates a compelling clash of rhythms and imagery, showcasing the artistry involved in holding two worlds together.
As he moves into the third phase, which includes his notable poem, Hymn to My Dumb Earth, Awoonor attempts to transition from conflict to integration. He suggests that the earlier divisions between African and European strands do not entirely vanish, yet they begin to harmonize in the voice of a single poet. In this voice, various elements coexist peacefully without conflict. Biblical echoes, nursery rhymes, drum rhythms, and everyday speech all play their parts beautifully.
Awoonor admits this phase remains exploratory. He describes himself as groping for a more narrative, almost journalistic technique that allows poetry to reflect storytelling while retaining its lyrical intensity. This experimentation suggests he is realizing yet another dimension of his growth as a writer, revealing a pursuit of understanding that is both personal and universal.
Later, Awoonor turns to prose, especially in his novel This Earth, My Brother. Here, he views his work not merely as fiction, but as a long prose poem, employing narrative as a framework to deepen his poetic sensitivity. This novel addresses corruption and the factors that erode societies, particularly against the backdrop of African settings influenced by colonial and post-colonial stresses.
However, he insists that the core images within the novel are human before they are specifically Ghanaian. The figures of suffering, conflict, and moral struggle stem from the African conditions he knows intimately, but resonate with a shared human experience. The story captures the struggles of a man caught within neo-colonial systems, yet it speaks to anyone confronted with unjust and dehumanizing structures.
When addressing the topic of social commitment in literature, Awoonor firmly believes that the writer cannot maintain neutrality. Simply by writing, the artist shoulders the responsibility of bearing witness to the joys and sorrows of society. He maintains that merely dwelling on suffering without transformation does not suffice, nor can a writer overlook the trials of the little man, whose struggles often remain invisible on the global stage.
Rejecting the notion of art for art's sake as an insular practice, Awoonor argues that aesthetic experimentation becomes a closed club if it ignores the larger human context. Instead, he asserts that art should serve as a window into the writer's inner life, exposing the shared experiences of people within society. The artist must remain rooted within the whirlwind of societal existence rather than withdraw.
Awoonor's insights provide us with a layered portrait of an artist navigating the spaces between languages, continents, and traditions. He challenges oversimplified categories of African versus European, protest versus pure art, asserting that a writer's main task is to unify experiences without erasing their complexities. His work exemplifies how a poet can honor inherited forms while boldly experimenting with new techniques and themes.
For our listeners, Awoonor's reflections resonate with an enduring question. How can writers and artists remain faithful to their roots while simultaneously addressing a diverse global audience? Perhaps the answer lies, as Awoonor suggests, in becoming a bridge, one that carries songs, stories, and memories across boundaries without erasing where they came from. Together, we can navigate these worlds, fostering a deeper understanding through art.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration of Kofi Awoonor's thoughts and artistic journey. We hope you've gained deeper insights into how personal history, cultural heritage, and the act of creating literature can resonate across different contexts. Until next time, continue to seek the voices that enrich our understanding of the human experience.